Maya Collins stopped. She stopped for a stranger. She stopped knowing full well what it might cost her. And what happened next is the kind of story that makes you question every single time you told yourself you were too busy to be kind. Maya Collins was not a woman the world had been particularly gentle with. She was 34 years old, a single mother, raising a 6-year-old daughter named Zoe in a 2-bedroom apartment on the southeast side of Atlanta. She was the kind of woman who woke up at 5 in the morning, packed a school lunch, pressed her one good blazer, studied for certifications at midnight, and still somehow found time to leave little encouraging notes on her daughter's pillow before school. She was not lucky. She was not connected. She did not have a safety net or a backup plan or a wealthy family standing by to catch her if she fell. What she had was Zoe. And what she had was the kind of quiet, unshakable belief that if you kept doing the right thing long enough, eventually, the right thing would find its way back to you. On September 12th, Maya was about to find out if she had been right all along. Maya Collins had been unemployed for 11 months when she got the email. 11 months of early morning alarms, of staring at a screen until her eyes burned, of submitting applications into what felt like a void that never wrote back. She had done everything right. She had earned her business operations certificate through an online program while working 2 part-time jobs and raising Zoe simultaneously. She had rewritten her resume 4 times. She had practiced interview answers in the bathroom mirror while Zoe brushed her teeth, because there was no other quiet moment in the day. And still the rejections came. Some were polite, some were just silence. But then on a Wednesday evening in late August, while Zoe was asleep and Maya was on her 3rd cup of coffee, an email arrived. The subject line read, "Interview invitation, operations manager position, Hargrove and Associates." Maya read it 3 times before she believed it. Hargrove and Associates was not just any company. In Atlanta's business community, it was the kind of name that carried weight. Founded 12 years earlier by a man named David Hargrove, the company had grown from a small consulting firm into one of the most respected privately held organizations in the Southeast. They were known for their culture, their benefits, their commitment to employees who stayed long-term. The operations manager role Maya had applied for offered a salary that would have ended every financial conversation she was having with herself at midnight. It offered full health coverage for her and Zoe. It offered the kind of stability that Maya had not felt in years. It was not just a job. It was the door she had been knocking on for the better part of a year. And on September 12th, she had an appointment to walk through it. She never made it through that door. And yet somehow, she still got everything on the other side of it. That is the story we are about to tell. And before we go any further, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because if this story moves you the way it moved us, you are going to want to be here every single week. To understand why September 12th mattered so much, you have to go back. Not just 11 months. You have to go back to the version of Maya Collins who existed before the divorce, before the unemployment, before the midnight study sessions, and the $3 budgets, and the practiced smiles she wore so Zoe would not worry. You have to go back to the woman she was building herself into before life decided to test how serious she was about it. Maya grew up in Savannah, Georgia, the middle child of 3, raised by a mother who cleaned houses for a living and a father who worked overnight shifts at a distribution warehouse. They were not wealthy, but they were a family in the truest sense of the word, present, loud, loving, and deeply committed to the idea that the next generation would have more options than the last. Maya was the one in the family who everyone agreed would go furthest. Not because she was the loudest or the most obvious, but because she was the most steady. Even as a child, she had a kind of quiet determination that her mother used to call that look. The look Maya got when she had decided something and nothing on earth was going to change it. She was the first in her family to attend a 4-year university, enrolling at Georgia State on a partial scholarship. and a combination of loans and work-study hours. She studied business administration, worked 20 hours a week in the campus bookstore, called her mother every Sunday, and graduated in 4 years with a 3.4 GPA and a head full of plans. She had mapped out her career in the careful, optimistic way that young people do when they still believe that hard work and a good plan are enough. She was going to work her way into operations management. She was going to build something stable and respectable. She was going to be the person her parents had sacrificed for her to become. And for a good while, it looked like she was right on track. She landed a coordinator position at a mid-sized logistics company in Atlanta. She was promoted within 18 months. She was good at her work in the specific way that managers notice. She solved problems before they became emergencies. She communicated clearly, and she treated everyone in the building, from the loading dock to the executive suite, with the same level of basic human respect. Her future, by every visible measure, was ahead of schedule. Then she met Marcus, and then she married Marcus. And then, in the slow and quiet way that some marriages fall apart, she found herself at 30 years old, sitting across a mediator's table, trying to figure out how to divide a life that had not turned out to be what either of them expected. The details of what happened between Maya and Marcus are not ours to dissect in the way that people on the internet sometimes like to do with someone else's pain. What matters is the outcome. Marcus left. Not just the marriage, but the financial responsibilities that came with it. The apartment was in his name. The car loan they had co-signed together became Maya's problem when he stopped paying it. And Zoe, who was 3 years old and had no opinion on any of it, became Maya's everything and Maya's sole responsibility overnight. There was no dramatic courtroom battle. There was no explosive confrontation. There was just Maya, standing in a new apartment she had found in 3 days, holding a sleeping toddler, looking at a stack of paperwork, and making the decision, the quiet, devastating, non-negotiable decision that she was not going to fall apart. Not in front of Zoe. Not ever. The years between 30 and 34 were what Maya later described to close friends as her building years. Not because they were glamorous or triumphant, but because every single day felt like construction. She worked 3 jobs at one point: a part-time coordinator role at a small freight company, weekend shifts at a hotel cleaning crew, and 2 evenings a week at a call center doing customer service for a cable provider. She was not doing these things because she lacked ambition. She was doing them because rent in Atlanta does not pause for your timeline. And Zoe needed stable childcare. And stable childcare costs money that does not arrive on inspiration alone. She enrolled in the online business operations certificate program during this period. Not because she had extra time, but because she had made a calculation. She could stay where she was, or she could use the hours between Zoe's bedtime and her own exhaustion to build the credentials that would eventually get her into a room she could not otherwise access. So that is what she did. For 14 months, Maya Collins studied at a kitchen table after a 6-year-old went to sleep, with a cup of cold coffee and a determination so quiet and so ironclad that it would have been invisible to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. The 11 months of unemployment that followed her certificate completion were not because Maya was not trying. They were because the gap on her resume, the years of survival jobs, the career interruption that the divorce and single parenthood had caused, made hiring managers hesitant in a way that no cover letter could fully overcome. She received callbacks. She got to second-round interviews. She came close more than once. But close, as every job seeker knows, does not pay rent. By the time the Hargrove and Associates email arrived, Maya's savings account had $140 in it. She had 11 days until rent was due. And she had a daughter who thought everything was fine because Maya had decided somewhere in those building years that Zoe would not grow up carrying her mother's anxiety. She had made that decision the way she made all her decisions, quietly, completely, and without looking back. The morning of September 12th, Maya was up at 5:15. She laid out Zoe's school clothes the night before. She had pressed her blazer, the navy one she'd bought 2 years earlier for interviews, and kept in the back of the closet like something sacred, and hung it on the back of the bathroom door so it would be the first thing she saw when she woke up. She had written out her interview answers on index cards and reviewed them the night before, until she could recite them without looking. She had confirmed the address 3 times. She had mapped the bus route twice. She had arranged for her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down and adored Zoe, to pick her up from school that afternoon. Every detail had been managed. Every variable had been accounted for. Maya Collins had gone into that morning the way she went into everything. Prepared, precise, and ready. She left the apartment at 9:19, which gave her 41 minutes to travel a route that should have taken 30. She had built in 11 minutes of buffer because Maya understood, in the way that people who have had too many things go wrong understand, that the world does not care about your timeline. The bus came on time. The transfer was smooth. By 9:44, she was on foot. 2 blocks from the address, blazers still crisp despite the September morning air that had turned damp and gray overnight. She checked her phone. 9:46, 14 minutes. She picked up her pace. And then she turned the corner onto Peachtree Street, and she saw her. The woman was sitting on a wooden bench near the bus shelter, and something about the way she was sitting told Maya immediately that something was wrong. She was elderly. In her late 70s, Maya would later estimate, with white hair pinned neatly and a wool coat that looked expensive but was now damp from the light rain that had started 20 minutes earlier. Her handbag had tipped over, and 2 paper grocery bags sat at her feet, one of them torn, its contents partially scattered across the wet sidewalk. A metal walker was propped against the bench at an angle that suggested it had slipped. The woman was not crying, but she had the expression of someone who was completely and utterly lost. Not the geographical kind of lost, but the deeper kind. The kind that comes over a person when the familiar suddenly becomes foreign and the ground beneath them no longer feels solid. She was looking at her phone with the concentrated, frightened expression of someone who could not figure out how to use it. And no one was stopping. People walked past her on both sides, umbrellas up, heads down, purpose in their stride, and not a single person stopped. Maya stopped. She has never been able to fully explain what happened in those 3 seconds, except to say that she was not thinking about the interview when she stopped. She was not thinking about the 14 minutes, or the $140 in her account, or the rent that was due in 11 days. She says that some part of her brain was absolutely still processing all of those things. She is not the kind of woman who pretends otherwise, but that the part of her that moved toward the bench was operating from somewhere older and quieter than calculation. She crossed the sidewalk, crouched down to eye level with the woman, and said 4 words. "Can I help you?" The woman's name was Eleanor Hargrove. Maya did not know that yet. In that moment, she was just an elderly woman who looked up at a stranger crouching in front of her in a navy blazer with kind eyes and said in a voice that was trying very hard to stay steady that she had gotten off the wrong bus stop, and her phone was not working, and she did not know where she was. Eleanor had a medical ID bracelet on her left wrist, the kind that lists an emergency contact number, and Maya, still crouching, gently asked if she could look at it. Eleanor nodded. Maya took out her own phone, dialed the number, and while it rang, she picked up the scattered groceries from the wet pavement and set them back in the torn bag as carefully as she could. She repositioned Eleanor's walker. She sat down on the bench beside her. The call rang through to voicemail. Maya left a clear, calm message with the bench's location and Eleanor's condition. Then she called again. It was 9:51 when Maya made those calls. She had 9 minutes. She knew it. She looked at her phone. She looked at Eleanor, who was gripping the edge of the bench with both hands and breathing with the careful, controlled rhythm of someone managing fear. And Maya Collins made the decision that the entire rest of this story depends on. She put her phone in her pocket. She did not call the interview coordinator to explain. She did not ask a stranger to take over. She sat with Eleanor Hargrove on a wet bench on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia, and she did not leave. Not in 9 minutes, not in 14. She stayed for 22. At 3, a woman named Diane, Eleanor's personal assistant, who had been on the other side of Atlanta dealing with a family emergency of her own that morning, came running around the corner, out of breath, phone in hand, the relief on her face so visible it was almost painful to witness. She saw Eleanor on the bench. She saw Maya sitting beside her, umbrella held over both of them. Her own umbrella, the one Maya had pulled from her bag, and Diane stopped and put her hand over her mouth. Maya stood up. She told Diane that Eleanor seemed okay, that she had been calm, that she had not fallen. Diane took Eleanor's hands and spoke to her quietly. And Eleanor, before she stood up, turned to Maya and held her hand for a moment and said something that Maya has never forgotten. She said, "You are a good woman, sweetheart. God sees you." At 10:08, Maya's phone buzzed. She already knew. She opened the message anyway, because she had earned the right to know exactly what she had traded. The message was from the interview coordinator at Hargrove and Associates. It read, "Collins, we had you scheduled for 10 a.m. We have moved on to our next candidate. Please feel free to reapply in 6 months." Maya read it once. She did not read it again. She stood on the corner of Peachtree Street in her navy blazer, in the rain without her umbrella, and she exhaled. Not the kind of exhale that means relief. The kind that means you are holding yourself together by sheer will and long practice. Then she walked to the bus stop and went home. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with losing something you worked incredibly hard for. It is not the sharp, sudden grief of unexpected tragedy. It is slower than that, and in many ways harder to manage, because it comes wrapped in the voice of every doubt you ever had about yourself. It whispers things like, maybe you were never going to make it anyway. Maybe this was always going to happen. Maybe the universe is not actually paying attention. Maya Collins knew that voice. She had been managing it for years. And on the bus ride home from Peachtree Street, with wet shoes and a damp blazer, and a message on her phone that had closed the one door she had been counting on, that voice was loud. She let it be loud. She gave it the bus ride. And then she got off at her stop, climbed the stairs to her apartment, changed out of her blazer, put rice on the stove, and started making dinner for her daughter. That evening followed the shape of every other evening in their apartment. Zoe came home from school with a drawing she had made during free period. A picture of her and Maya, both of them with enormous yellow sun hair, standing in front of a house with a red door. Maya taped it to the refrigerator next to the other drawings. They ate dinner together. Maya helped Zoe with her reading homework. They were working through a chapter book about a girl who trained horses, and Zoe had opinions about every character that she shared at considerable length. Maya bathed her, read to her, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. She stood in the doorway of Zoe's room for a moment after the light went out, the way parents do when they need to remember why they are still standing. Then she closed the door softly, walked to the bathroom, sat down on the cold tile floor with her back against the bathtub, and allowed herself a few minutes of falling apart in the specific, private, contained way that single mothers fall apart. Which is to say, quietly, behind a closed door, so no one has to carry it but them. She had $140 in her account. Rent was due in 11 days. She was back to zero. Not figuratively, literally, structurally, financially back to the beginning of the search. She submitted 3 applications that night from the kitchen table after her 10 minutes on the bathroom floor, because Maya Collins did not have the luxury of allowing grief to be productive for longer than 10 minutes. She set her alarm for 5:15. She went to sleep. And the next morning, she woke up and started again, the way she always did, because Zoe was going to wake up in 2 hours and ask for her oatmeal with the brown sugar on top, and that was enough of a reason. The days that followed were the kind of quiet that looks normal from the outside and feels like holding your breath from the inside. Maya submitted applications. She followed up on previous submissions. She received 2 responses in the first week, one from a part-time warehouse coordination role that paid $12 an hour, and one from a data entry position that was technically full-time, but offered no benefits and a salary that would not have covered rent and childcare simultaneously. She was preparing herself with the resigned practicality of someone who has learned not to be precious about survival, to accept both jobs and keep looking. She was recalculating, adjusting, doing what she had always done. What she did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that on the other side of Atlanta, in a glass office tower, on the 7th floor of a building she had never entered, a conversation was happening that had everything to do with her. David Hargrove was 53 years old, and the company that bore his name was the most important thing he had built. Not the most important thing in his life. His mother Eleanor held that distinction without competition and had for as long as he could remember. David's father had passed when David was 19, and from that point forward it had been the two of them navigating the world together in the specific, quietly devoted way of a son who understood early that the woman who raised him was extraordinary and did not intend to take a single day of her for granted. Eleanor Hargrove was not a soft woman. She had raised David on the south side of Atlanta in circumstances that required her to be sharp and self-sufficient and unwilling to accept a ceiling. She was the one who told him, when he came to her at 28 with a business plan and a $30,000 loan he had no guarantee of repaying, that she believed him. Not that it would definitely work. That she believed him. There is a difference, and David knew it. And he had carried it with him through every difficult year of building something from nothing. On the morning of September 12th, David was 40 minutes into a board meeting when his phone buzzed with a message from Diane. The message was short. Eleanor had gotten off at the wrong stop. She was safe and found. A woman on the street had stayed with her until Diane arrived. David excused himself from the board meeting, stepped into the hallway, and called Diane directly. Diane told him the full account. The bench, the scattered groceries, the rain, the 22 minutes, the umbrella. She told him that the woman had been calm and kind and had held Eleanor's hand and had not left until she was certain Eleanor was in safe hands. She told him that Eleanor, for the rest of the drive home, had talked about her. David asked Diane one question. Did she give you her name? Diane said yes, it was Maya Collins. David stood in the corridor outside the boardroom for a moment, processing. Then he went back inside, finished the meeting, and afterward, quietly, without mentioning it to anyone, he pulled up the day's interview log. He found her name in 30 seconds, Maya Collins, 10 a.m. slot, no show. David read that word, no show, and sat with the particular discomfort of a man who prides himself on his judgment, realizing that he had nearly allowed a bureaucratic label to become the final word on a human being. He read her resume. He read her cover letter. He read it twice. The cover letter said, in part, I am not the most experienced candidate you will interview, but I am the most motivated. I have a daughter who watches everything I do, and every day I try to show her that integrity and hard work are not negotiable, even when the world makes them inconvenient. I will show up for this company the way I show up for her, completely. David put the cover letter down. He looked out his office window at the Atlanta skyline for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called his mother. Eleanor answered on the second ring, the way she always did. David asked her how she was feeling, and she said she was fine, a little tired, but fine. And then he asked her about the woman on the bench. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, and then she said, and these are the words that David Hargrove has repeated in the years since, because they stayed with him. She said, David, that woman stayed with me in the rain. She picked up my groceries from the ground, and she held my hand, and she never once made me feel like I was a burden. She was dressed like she had somewhere important to be, and she sat with me anyway. That is a person. That is the kind of person you don't forget. David listened. And then he asked his mother something quietly, almost more to himself than to her. He said, What should I do, Mom? And Eleanor said, without hesitating, Find her, David. There was a long pause. He said, Okay. 9 days passed between September 12th and the afternoon that changed everything. 9 days during which Maya Collins had no idea that any of this was happening. She did not know that David Hargrove had read her cover letter twice. She did not know that Eleanor had talked about her every day since the bench. She did not know that on the 7th floor of a building she had never entered, A decision was slowly forming around the shape of who she was, rather than the label of what she had missed. She only knew what she could see from where she was standing, which was a part-time warehouse role, a data entry posting, a daughter who needed stability, and 11 days, then 10, then 9, of financial pressure that was not going to pause for the story to resolve itself. She kept going. She always kept going. It was a Thursday afternoon, September 21st, and Zoe had just gotten home from school. Maya was at the kitchen table, reviewing the warehouse role's onboarding paperwork, when her phone rang. The number was an Atlanta area code she did not recognize. She answered it. The voice on the other end was composed and direct, and introduced itself with a name that landed somewhere between confusion and disbelief in Maya's chest. He said, "Miss Collins, this is David Hargrove. I'm the CEO of Hargrove and Associates. I believe you were scheduled to interview with us recently." Maya's first instinct before anything else was to apologize. She started talking immediately, explaining that she had been nearby, that there had been an elderly woman who needed help, that she had tried to make it in time. She was mid-sentence when David Hargrove said the words that stopped her completely. He said, "Miss Collins, I know. She's my mother." 12 words, that is all it took. 12 words to collapse the distance between the woman on the bench and the building she never entered. 12 words to make the entire architecture of coincidence that had been building for 9 days suddenly visible in full. Maya did not respond immediately. She has said since that she needed a moment to understand what she was hearing, not the words themselves, which were clear, but the weight behind them. The fact that the woman she had stayed with in the rain was the mother of the man whose company she had sacrificed to stay with her. The fact that the umbrella she had given away was returned, in a sense, in a form she could never have imagined. She sat very still at the kitchen table while Zoe colored at the other end of it, and she said quietly, "Oh my God." David Hargrove spent the next several minutes telling Maya what she did not know. He told her that Diane had called him the morning of the 12th. He told her that Eleanor had not stopped talking about her. He told her that he had found her name in the interview log and read her resume and her cover letter and had spent 9 days asking himself a question he could not let go of. He said, "The operations manager role that you applied for, we've actually filled that position internally. But I've been holding a different role open for 8 months because I couldn't find the right person for it. It's a director-level position, Director of Community Operations, and I want to know if you'd be willing to come in and talk about it. Not as a formality, because I think you might be exactly who I've been looking for." Maya Collins has described the minute after that sentence as the strangest minute of her adult life. Not because it was bad, because it was so far outside of anything she had allowed herself to hope for that her mind did not immediately know what to do with it. She had spent 11 months practicing the kind of contained, disciplined hope that does not allow itself to get too large, because large hope is expensive when it collapses. She had gotten very good at hoping just enough to keep going, not enough to be destroyed by the next rejection. And now a man she had never met was on the phone telling her that the morning she thought had cost her everything might have been. Instead, the morning that found her the exact thing she had been searching for. She said she would come in. They set a time. She hung up the phone. She looked at Zoe across the table. Zoe looked up from her coloring and said, "Who was that, Mama?" And Maya said, "I think that was a good day." And Zoe said, "Good," and went back to coloring. The interview happened 2 days later. Maya later described it as the most unusual professional conversation she had ever been a part of. Not uncomfortable, but unusually honest, unusually human. David Hargrove did not ask her the standard questions first. He told her, at the very beginning of the meeting, that he had a philosophy about hiring that he had developed over 12 years of building a company. He said that credentials and experience were the floor, not the ceiling. That what he was actually trying to determine in any interview was character. Specifically, whether the person sitting across from him would make good decisions under pressure, whether they had integrity when integrity was inconvenient, and whether they treated people at every level of the organization with genuine respect. He said that most of the time, that took an entire interview to figure out. In her case, he already knew the answer. She had shown him on a street corner in the rain, with 14 minutes on the clock and everything on the line. The director of community operations role at Hargrove and Associates had been vacant for 8 months because David Hargrove was, by his own admission, almost impossibly particular about who he placed in it. The role was responsible for managing all of the company's community partnerships, its nonprofit initiatives, its employee wellness programming, and its relationship with the Atlanta community at large. It required someone who understood operations at a technical level, the systems, the logistics, the reporting, but who also brought a quality that David could only describe as genuine investment in people, not performance. Not a well-constructed LinkedIn profile full of the right language. Actual, demonstrated, under-pressure investment in people. He told Maya in that interview that he had been waiting 8 months and had interviewed 11 candidates and had not been satisfied. He told her that watching her walk past the Easy Choice on Peachtree Street told him more about who she was than any interview process could have, and then he offered her the job. The salary was $87,000 a year, full health benefits for Maya and Zoe, a flexible schedule with remote options that acknowledged the reality of being a working parent, paid leave, a professional development budget. Maya sat across the conference table from David Hargrove in the same navy blazer she had pressed 9 days earlier and listened to the offer being described, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not just relief, not just gratitude, though she felt both of those in abundance. She felt, underneath everything else, a deep and almost disorienting sense of recognition. The feeling of arriving somewhere you did not know you were looking for until you were finally there. She accepted the offer. She thanked David Hargrove. She took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out of the glass building she had never entered 11 days earlier, and she stood on the sidewalk in the September afternoon sun and allowed herself to feel all of it at once. I could end the story there. Maya gets the job. The good person wins. The universe keeps its ledger balanced, and everyone goes home feeling warm about the world. But I think that would be a disservice to this story, and honestly, a disservice to you. Because the reason Maya Collins's story has stayed with me, and the reason I think it is going to stay with you, is not the outcome. Outcomes in isolation are just events. They happen or they don't. They resolve or they don't. The outcome is not the lesson. The decision is the lesson. And the decision happened on a bench in the rain before anyone knew how the story would end. Before Maya knew she was being watched. Before she knew Eleanor's last name. Before she knew any of it. The decision was made in total uncertainty, which is the only kind of decision that actually reveals who you are. Think about what Maya did not have on the morning of September 12th. She did not have a backup plan. She did not have savings that would absorb a missed opportunity. She did not have a partner to share the weight with, or a family with resources to catch her, or a second interview already scheduled for the following week. She had $140 and a 6-year-old and 1 blazer and 1 shot. And she spent 22 minutes of that shot sitting next to a stranger in the rain. She did not do it because she thought it would pay off. She did not do it because she was naive about the cost. She did it because she looked at an elderly woman sitting alone and frightened on a wet bench and understood that there was no version of herself that she could live with that would have walked past her. That is not a magical gift that some people have and others don't. That is a choice. It is a choice that is available to every single person who has ever been in a hurry with everything on the line, which is to say, it is available to all of us. Here is the part of the story that I think deserves its own moment, because it tends to get overshadowed by the dramatic shape of how everything resolved. In the year after Maya joined Hargrove and Associates, she built the community operations program into something that the Atlanta Business Chronicle would eventually describe as a model for mid-sized companies in the region. She grew the company's nonprofit partnerships from 4 organizations to 19. She created an employee wellness initiative that was specifically designed around the needs of working parents and was later adopted as a template by 3 other firms in the city. And she made a decision early in her tenure about hiring. She told David Hargrove that she wanted to build her team, where possible, with people who had unconventional resumes, people with gaps, people with survival jobs on their records, people who had been passed over by automated systems that did not know how to read a human story. David Hargrove said yes. Within 18 months, 12 of those people were on Maya's team. 12 people who had been where she had been, who now had the kind of stability she had spent years fighting toward. Eleanor Hargrove comes to the company Christmas party every year. She sits at Maya's table. She and Zoe have a relationship that defies easy categorization. Eleanor brings her hard candy and asks about her horsebook and remembers the names of her friends from school. Zoe calls her Miss Ellie and draws her pictures that Eleanor keeps on the refrigerator in her home. It started on a bench in the rain between 2 strangers, and it became something that no one involved had the language to predict. That is how most of the things that matter begin. Not with a plan, but with a moment where someone decides to show up fully for something that costs them something real. David Hargrove, in a conversation that was later referenced in a profile piece about his company's culture, was asked about his hiring philosophy. He was asked specifically about the role of character assessment in how he built his leadership team. He said this: "The person you are really looking for will not always look impressive on paper. They will be impressive when no one is looking. They will be impressive when it is inconvenient. They will be impressive at 9:46 in the morning when they have 14 minutes, and everything on the line, and a stranger needs help." I was waiting to see that. He had been waiting 8 months. He saw it on a Tuesday morning, in the rain, through a story his mother told him with her hand pressed to her heart. 1 year after the bench, Maya Collins was named to Atlanta Business Chronicle's 40 Under 40 list. The citation described her as a rising voice in community-centered business issues and highlighted the growth of the Hargrove program under her leadership. Maya framed the citation and hung it in her kitchen, not because she needed the validation, but because Zoe saw it every morning at breakfast. And Maya wanted her daughter to grow up understanding that the story of a woman's success could look different from what the world usually showed her. She wanted Zoe to know that the blazer and the bench and the 22 minutes were part of the same story as the framed certificate on the wall. She wanted her to understand that who you are in the hard moments is not separate from where you end up. It is the reason you end up there. The bench is the metaphor, but the bench is also real. There is something in your life right now that is functioning as your bench. There is a moment coming, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, where you will be in a hurry, where the stakes will feel impossibly high, where everything you have worked for will feel like it is sitting just around the corner waiting for you, and something will ask you to stop. Something inconvenient. Something that costs you something real. And you will have approximately 3 seconds to decide. Not who you want to be. Not who you have been in the past. Who you are right now, in this moment, when no one is watching and everything is on the line. Maya Collins had 3 seconds. She used them. And everything else in this story is the consequence of those 3 seconds. What will your 3 seconds reveal? I want to know what you think. Scroll down to the comments right now and tell me honestly, would you have stopped? Not who you want to be. Not who you believe yourself to be in theory. In that actual moment, with 14 minutes left and everything on the line, with the message from the interview coordinator already waiting to be sent, would you have stopped? I am genuinely asking. I want this community to be the kind of place where we can be honest about those questions. Because the people who watch this channel are not here for easy answers. They are here because they want to think hard about what it means to live well. And this story is exactly that kind of invitation. If Maya's story moved you, if it gave you something to think about, something to carry into the rest of your week, share it with someone who needs it today. Not for the algorithm. Not for the views. Share it because you know someone who is in their building years right now. Someone who is sitting on the bathroom floor after a hard day doing the contained, private, necessary work of keeping themselves together. Someone who needs to be reminded that the thing that makes them who they are, the quality that shows up even when it costs them, is not a liability. It is the thing that is going to find them what they are looking for. Send it to that person. With no explanation. They will know why. And if you are that person, if you are in the middle of your building years right now, if you are the one with the one blazer and the late night issues and the quiet, exhausting, non-negotiable commitment to not letting your child see you give up, then I want you to hear this directly. The bench is not the end of the story. The bench is where the real story begins. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not invisible to the things that are meant to find you. Keep going. Do it the way Maya did it. Not loudly, not perfectly, but completely. Keep going.